Hello everybody, this video covers from page 16 onwards then in our close reading and annotation of Willie Russell's Blood Brothers. First of all though, before we start on the new section, just a reminder of the final line of the previous one, which we said introduced this really important motif of debts that must be repaid, referring to the idea of consequences for your actions. It's a crucial quotation, and it's one that's going to be important in this section as well. Now, after the narrator exits, as the heartbeat sound that was used to symbolise Mrs. Johnston's pregnancy reaches maximum volume, it suddenly stops and is replaced by the sound of crying babies. Two nurses appear, each carrying a bundle. A pram is wheeled on. The nurse hands the bundles to Mrs. Johnston, who, smiling, places them into the pram, making faces and noises at the babies as she stops the crying. The babies settled, she sets off, wheeling the pram towards home. There we are, in quite a Brechtian moment, this. It's almost sort of, it's almost montage-like then, the way that we see this kind of mime section. But at the end of that section it says then that various debt collectors emerge from the house to confront Mrs. Johnston. This is why we were saying that the motif of debt will be important. First of all then, the catalogue man. Now it's worth just mentioning that at this time there was a big widening in access to who could apply for sort of loans and credit, and so there was a big boom in people buying things from catalogues, and you would pay for the goods in instalments. You'd be charged interest on it. It was very popular at this time. So the catalogue man says, "I'm sorry, love, the kids said you were at the hospital." He looks in the pram. "Ah, they're lovely, aren't they? I'm sorry, love, especially at a time like this, but you are 12 weeks behind with your payments. I've got to do this, girl." Now, this then can be grouped with the milkman earlier, in that we get a sense of the sort of wider lack of sympathy of society. The milkman taking milk from her, the catalogue man now is about to take back things that she's bought on credit from her, even as she arrives home with these new babies. The heartlessness of society. The finance man then, the sidekick says, "You shouldn't sign for the bloody stuff, missus. If you know you can't pay, you shouldn't bloody well sign." Catalogue man says, "Look, if you could give me a couple of weeks' money on this, I could leave it." Mrs. Johnston shakes her head. The finance man again, more cruelly, I think, emphasising the role of society, says, "You shouldn't have signed for all this stuff, should you? You knew you wouldn't be able to pay, didn't you?" Mrs. Johnston, almost to herself, says, "When I got my job, I thought I would be able to pay. When I went into the showroom, I only meant to come out with a couple of things. But when you're standing there, it all looks so nice. When you look in the catalogue and there's 6 months to pay, it seems years away, and you need a few things, so you sign. Well, you bloody well shouldn't, should you?" Mrs. Johnston says, coming out of a trance and rather angrily, says, "I know I shouldn't, you soft get." Soft in Liverpool sort of slang, meaning stupid or silly. "I've spent all my bleeding life knowing I shouldn't, but I do. Now, take your sodding wireless and get off." Catalogue man says, "Ah, well, as long as you can laugh about it, eh, that's the main thing, isn't it?" And the catalogue man exits. Mrs. Johnston, firmly not laughing, says, "Yeah." Other creditors continue to enter the house and leave with goods. Now, before we go on, it's worth just mentioning something else here, because I think very firmly that the idea of buying on credit in this way can be linked to the theme of escapism that we've already mentioned. It's this idea that just by signing up for something, you can take home an item or have it delivered to your house. And so again, it's a sort of way of grasping at a world that is not yours, that you can't afford. When we think about the kind of things that you see on stage that she is that are being taken from her, it's always things like toys and that sort of thing. And I think that's something else that's worth mentioning. She's not doing this for selfishness. She is not taking these items for herself or for her own enrichment. It's for the children. That's why she's doing this. She's not signing up for these things out of malice or out of a desire to commit fraud. She's doing it to provide for her children. So we see her in a really quite a strong, quite a noble light. But there's something pitiful about the fact that she can't do it. She can't actually keep up these things. A sad moment, even though it's disguised with the spas by Brecht. But yes, linked very much to the idea of buying things on credit, very much linked to escapism. So, other creditors continue to enter the house and leave with goods, and Mrs. Johnson watches them. The babies begin to cry, and she moves to the pram, rocking it gently as she sings, as if to the babies in the pram. Once again, Willie Russell here, deliberately, by the way that he juxtaposes her comforting the babies against her being accused of being careless with money by the finance man, he's deliberately emphasising that we're meant to see her as a sympathetic character and that she is tender-hearted. So she sings, "Only mine until the time comes round to pay the bill. Then I'm afraid what can't be paid must be returned. You never ever learn that nothing's yours on easy terms." Easy terms being the slang name for buying things on this kind of credit. The idea being that theoretically they should be easy to repay. But of course, lots of these companies, one, made money from charging the interest on people to buy them, but secondly also then if they were able to reclaim the good and resell it because someone couldn't actually pay for it, then of course they were making money twice. So the whole thing really was a little bit of a scam in many cases. But she continues, "Only for a time I must not learn to call you mine, familiarise that face, those eyes, make future plans that cannot be confirmed on borrowed time, on easy terms." Now, the next line here refers to living on the never never. The never never was another slang name for buying on credit, because it referred to the fact that because of the amount of interest you would have to pay, you would never actually own the thing that you are buying, because you would be paying for it for such a long time. So that's the thing there. But again, you see, we talked about the idea of a debts. You've also got reference here to paying the bills, and in this next stanza, living on the never never, this idea that her whole life in a sense is mortgaged, her whole life is not her own. Constant as the changing weather, which is a kind of oxymoron, because actually it's very much a feature of the working class life that Willie Russell presents, that actually it is very fragile and very precarious. And fundamentally they suffer this lack of control over their lives, which, to link back to the previous video, is one of the reasons why I would argue that the whole superstition thing is important. This idea that people cling to superstitions because it gives them an illusion of control, even though their life is seemingly falling down around them. So, never sure who's at the door or the price I'll have to pay. Should we meet again, I will not recognise your name. You can be sure what's gone before will be concealed. Your friends will never learn that once you were on easy terms. So she's now sort of moving into a different understanding or different meaning of the idea of easy terms, in the sense of people getting on well. In other words, people would never know that this was her baby. And finally she returns to that chorus, living on the never never, constant to the changing weather, never sure who's at your door or the price I'll have to pay. So there we have it. We have this sort of tender moment of the sort of regret that she feels, the sadness at losing the child that will be going with Mrs. Lyons, and at this point Mrs. Lyons enters, still with the pregnancy padding, and says, "They're born. You didn't notify me." "Well, couldn't I keep them for a few more days, please? Please, they're a pair. They go together." "My husband is due back tomorrow, Mrs. Johnston. I must have my baby. We made an agreement, a bargain. You swore on the Bible." See again now how the manipulation is starting to become now more forceful, more accusatory. The emphasis there on the plural pronoun. We made the agreement, and then you, in the second person, you swore on the Bible, as if somehow this is all Mrs. Johnston's fault. Mrs. Johnston says, you better see which one you want." "I'll take..." "No, don't tell me which one. Just take him." take him. And she returns now to that song and sings, living on the never never, constant to the changing weather, never sure who's at the door or the price I'll have to pay should we meet again. Now, in contrast to the tenderness there of Mrs. Johnston, we directly see again the juxtaposition to Mrs. Lyons, because she rapidly pulls out the padding from beneath her dress, almost greedily one might say. Amongst it is a shawl which she uses to wrap around the baby before picking it up from the pram. Mrs. Lyons says, "Thank you, Mrs. Johnston, thank you. I'll see you next week." Mrs. Johnston says, "I'm due back tomorrow." "I know, but why don't you take the week off, on full pay, of course?" Now, the promise that Mrs. Lyons made was that Mrs. Johnston would be able to see her baby every day. So already we're starting to see how she's breaking away from the promises that she had made. Furthermore, it's exercising of her economic power, because she can make a promise like that, knowing that to pay for it is no problem at all. So we're seeing that there again. So Mrs. Lyons exits. Mrs. Johnston turns and enters her house with the remaining twin in the pram. The first kid, off stage, shouts, "What happened to the other twin, Mother? Where's the other twinny, ma'am?" "He's gone. He's gone up to heaven, love. He's living with Jesus and the angels." Now, obviously, on the one hand, this is a lie, because she obviously has to say something to her children, but there's an irony here, because, of course, what is heaven but paradise? And in a sense, it is a kind of paradise. It is a kind of heaven that the boy who will become Edward has gone to. The third kid says, "What's it like there, ma'am, in heaven?" And Mrs. Johnston says, "It's lovely, son. He'll be well looked after there. He'll have anything he wants." And this is where the irony starts to develop, because actually what she's describing here is not specifically heaven, but it is the Lyons' house. And what does kid one say? Will he have his own bike? And she replies, "Yeah, with both wheels on." So this is the second time that image recurs from the conversation that Mrs. Johnston and Mrs. Lyons had previously. So it really starts to become quite a powerful motif for contentment, for simply having enough, to just get by, which is what Mrs. Johnston says. Kid one says, "Why can't I have a bike, eh? I'll have a look in the catalogue next week. We'll see what the bikes are like in there." And again, emphasis, it's for the children. That's why she buys things from the catalogue. It's not for her own gain. It's out of selflessness, out of love. The kids, together off stage, shout, "Ma'am, I want a Meccano set. You said I could have a new dress, Mother. Why can't I have an air pistol? Let's look in the catalogue now, ma'am. It's great when we look in the catalogue. Ma'am, go on, let's all look in the catalogue." And so you start to see that even for the children, the catalogue itself is a kind of escapism, in the same way that you can go to the cinema and see a film which represents an escape from your everyday life. Even looking at the catalogue, looking at the possessions in there, the pictures in there, all of course advertised in glorious full colour, in itself is another example of escapism. Mrs. Johnston says, "I've told you, when I get home, I've got to go to work." Notice there then the flexible use of time, the way that Russell is subverting that classical tragic unity of time by having the fact that a week has suddenly gone by in the space of that conversation. Again, it's emphasising the theatricality. Again, it's part of the alienation idea. But at that point, she has to go to work, and we will leave that there at the top of page 20, and we will resume in my next video. Thank you very much indeed, once again.